welcome to Corner Comics, your mostly weekly comic book reading club. I am your host, Barkov, and I'm joined by my friends. Each week we get together, we share a few issues with each other, then we talk about those issues. Gentlemen, how are you doing this interesting Sunday morning?
Up and at 'em. I'm doing great, even though the world, or at least our local world, is not. But I am safe as houses, as they would say, and letting the world destroy itself around me. Well, I keep my air conditioning, and that's good 77 degrees.
Right. Emmanuel?
Plus Ultra. I am good. I'm good today. I had to put out something else as well because Russ tries to be the top tier every time and say something. So my next one is going to be Excelsior or something else since I've already said it. But yeah, I'm great today. Today is a good day. Regardless, today's a great day.
Awesome. Where can people find you guys on the internet?
You can find me at blacksuperherofan.com. Just uploaded something yesterday. You can also find me at Comic Creators of Color, which has a revamp coming, which you have not gotten into. You can also find me on Twitter at Walrus. That's at WALLRUSS. Jump in my DMs, drop me a note.
Nice, Emmanuel.
Nice. You can find me on the gram. That's Instagram for you noobs at EM_MAN_YOU_EL. Also, you can find me at EmmanuelTheStory.com.
Nice. So, if you are reading along with us and you have any thoughts on the books, you can get a hold of us at cornercomicsofficial@gmail.com and slowly building a cornercomics.net website, which will host the show notes and have random thoughts from us, comic related and otherwise probably. So hopefully I can get some more work done on that this week and actually have a nicer website to go to, one with a back end that Russ won't get frustrated with. So yeah, we've got 6 books as usual. I'm coming full DC this week, guys. Are you surprised?
I am.
I am. My
I didn't know
eyebrows
you
did
do that many
raise.
DC books.
So I'm bringing Green Lantern Volume 3. This is the 1994 run, and it's issue number 55. This is one that takes place after the Emerald Twilight story, which is probably one of the few stories that I really got into in terms of Green Lantern and DC. And my second book is Swamp Thing. This is Volume 5, issue number 1. This is the new 52 run. So this is Scott Snyder's Swamp Thing. And the reason that I'm bringing this one is because my wife decided that she wanted to start reading comics and she was going to start with Swamp Thing. And so I said, okay, maybe I should read it too. It just so happens to be a DC book. Russ, what 2 issues have you got?
I have the first issue of The Marked. It's an Image comic. And what if magic was based in tattoos? And what could you do with them? And because not enough murder yet, I also brought the Ludocrats, which is ludicrous, and there's some murder. And I like both of those things, right? Emmanuel?
All right, my first issue is Youth, issue number 2. It is a Comixology original, art by D. Cunniffe and Michael Myers, and Micah Myers, not Michael Myers. Story by Kurt Pyers and Alex Dito. The second issue is 1997 run of JLA, Justice League of America, issue number 43, the Tower of Babel storyline. And that is by the artist by Howard Porter, Steve Scott, John Callens, and the story is by Mark Wade.
Nice. Yeah, I know Mark Wade's one of your favorite writers, Russ. And Emmanuel, you came through with the JLA. We'll get to it. But did not disappoint with my call for some good Justice League. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. We'll get into my first issue, Green Lantern issue number 55 from the 1994 run. This is, like I said, after the Emerald Twilight storyline where Hal Jordan goes crazy and ends up with 10 Green Lantern rings. He wants all the power. He wants to bring back Coast City, um, which is his hometown after that gets destroyed. Uh, I picked this one because of the cover. Two Green Lanterns against each other, and neither of them are Hal Jordan, which I thought was really cool. And I thought that this was an interesting issue as I sort of browsed through it, in that you get to see how the lanterns use their powers, right? So it's very much the ring is how they use their powers is a manifestation of their personalities. And I know Kyle Rayner was never a really popular Green Lantern. I don't think a lot of people particularly cared for his character that much, but um, I think he's an interesting Lantern. And there was a great two-page spread, which is the background of this episode today, where you've got Green Lantern and it talks about the Guardians and all that. So, what are your guys' thoughts on this issue?
Manual.
I liked the art. The art itself stands out as a placement of the times. It is very much, what is it, the 90s, late 90s? Very much to the late 90s, and it screams it, which is great. Very colorful, very, you see the outline of every character, even the thought bubbles and the word bubbles themselves have a particular 90-esque vibe to them. The story itself, like you said, Kyle Rayner is not really one of the fan favorites when it comes to Green Lanterns. Uh, you have Hal Jordan, you have John Stewart, and that's essentially what people know. But Kyle Rayner isn't one of the top tier. I think his personality wasn't really well written, all that well, and it kind of comes through here. Now, I'm not familiar with his storyline so much, but in this issue, I know that his girlfriend died, and that's a hard thing for anyone. So it does give a bit of character development for him. That arc of now he's missing someone he loves. It kind of is reminiscent of the whole Uncle Ben thing. Is that going to encourage him to be a better hero or be a hero? Because this is his kind of initiation into getting the ring. So he's very familiar, very unfamiliar with it, and new to it all. So he, at the end of this issue, you kind of see him mulling it over and thinking about what his ex or dead girlfriend, very morbid, but his dead girlfriend would say about him going into the superhero life. So is that going to spur him to become a better lantern? Obviously not, because his issue didn't last long. But but it still was intriguing, and that it was a good jumping point, starting point for this character. The issue overall, good art, good story, not great.
All right.
Okay, I like the art too. Again, very much a product of its time, but for that time, this was very nicely done. I like the details. I especially like the placement of the shadows around people's faces and things like that. I really enjoyed that. Very clear, easy to read. You know, there's no point in here where you don't know what the heck is going on. The power signatures are there. Uh, you know, so all in all, I think the art was good and on point. Um, as far as the story, I found the story to be just okay. And maybe it's harder for me because I probably read all of these issues. I'm going to say I've never found Kyle Rayner personality wise to be interesting. Right? I'm
Yeah.
going to sort of the manual said in that. What the thing that made him interesting was that he was a graphic artist. So the things that his ring would create were made in the style of someone who was a graphic artist. That was interesting, right? And continues to be interesting. Like, what would you have him do? Because he's probably the only one that would make a big Green Lantern Zord, and or do some kind of Power Ranger type thing because it's a modern take on how to use that. Whereas old school Green Lantern would just make a big green hand and slap you with it. right?
Right.
So not that interesting. And I put in the show notes, my Green Lantern preferences are as follows in order of who I love. Hal Jordan is way down the list, right? Hal Jordan is basically Maverick. You know what I mean? Top Gun pilot, cocky, all of that.
Yeah.
So my favorite is going to be John Stewart, especially after what they did to him in the Justice League series. My second favorite is in this book. It is Alan Scott. Alan Scott is the original Green Lantern in all of DC Comics. He was the first. Before there was a Green Lantern Corps, there was Alan Scott in the JSA. What I liked about what I remember fondly about Alan Scott back in the day, you know how Green Lantern supposedly has no power against yellow?
Mhm.
Back before that, the old school Green Lantern had no power against wood.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So you could walk up to him with a wooden bat and go right through his shield and knock him the fuck out. Right? I remember, and it's going way back, there was a time when they had the Justice League and Justice Society fighting together, and they were like, the Green Lanterns, the new and the old, were going to go battle this thing that could even destroy Superman, right? And Green Arrow says, nope, because your guy's weakness. And he says, you know what I keep in my quiver, right? You know what I keep in my quiver? He says, and he pulls out a yellow wooden arrow.
Wow.
Right? Like Batman would have kryptonite.
Yeah.
He said, all this guy has to do is send 1,000 yellow wooden arrows through the air, and it would cut through your shields and kill you.
It's an interesting weakness.
Yeah. Since then, I believe that the yellow impurity has been taken out of the Green Lantern rings. I think now they can fight yellow. I think that was the whole Parallax thing, was that he was a yellow alien. And there's one striking thing in the art, which I was totally unnecessary, and yet here is Hal Jordan butt shot. You know how they'll have women that their butt will be facing you, right? And then they'll somehow turn halfway around so you can see their face and their butt at the same time, which is in theory is anatomically impossible. They got a Hal Jordan who's not even in there in this issue, a big old Hal Jordan butt shot. And I'm thinking, why? I mean, I don't know, maybe that's sexy. Maybe I'm just being, maybe I should appreciate that women read comics too. And maybe they eat a little butt cheese. I don't know. But if I'm trying to see where it is in there. But there's a big old Hal Jordan telling his story where his butt is facing you and his face is facing you at the same time.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for that.
I didn't even. I honestly didn't even really. It didn't dawn on me that was what was happening.
Equal opportunity butt cheek.
Yeah, right. I mean, they show both butt cheeks. It's not like you see the side butt cheek. You see both butt cheeks.
Don't demonstrate
like this the whole time, but his butt cheeks. So, and he's got a whole page on that of Hal Jordan butt cheeks. Other than that, I like it. You didn't really get to see. You can see a little bit of how Alan Scott uses his ring quite differently.
Yeah,
more the power of the green flames. So there's often a lot of flames associated with how he uses his powers. So I like the art. I like the nostalgia maybe of it and being able to see that. I didn't feel like you needed to read this story though.
Okay.
But if you don't know that much about Green Lantern, this really gives you a good primer, right? Basically, Lantern Corps. It tells you that there's a Green Lantern who's here, who came before, right? Who uses different power, why they exist, what they're about. All that is explained in this book, and even pays tribute to Hal Jordan. So if you wanted to know and you wanted some good art, this might do it for you.
Yeah. Okay. Any? Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. One of the ways in which I wanted to point out Mr. Alan Scott, the original Green Lantern, his power is when he's placing Kyle Rayner up against the wall. You see the flames, but you also see the skeletal structure of a hand as he is using his ring to hold him up against the wall. That was creative. Normally, it's just a flame without any kind of distinction. You know it's in the figure, the shape of a hand, but you actually see bone structures when Alan Scott is placing Kyle Rayner up against the wall. That attention to detail, that was really good. I noted that.
That was one of the things about John Stewart in the comics, is that he was not only a Marine, he's also an architect. So he actually would create machines, but he built in his head all the things that were on the inside, all the moving parts. So he would, whereas Kyle Rayner would make an awesome Zord, he would actually make something with the gears and everything else and imagine how it works. So everything, so that's one of the things that makes each Green Lantern different, is how they use the ring. And certainly this guy, Kyle Rayner, does use it in an interesting way. He's just a milquetoast dude. I'm just not feeling it.
His mask is cool, though.
Yeah, it is.
All right, moving on to my second issue. Swamp Thing, number 1, New 52. The New 52, I sort of missed out on this stuff. I knew that DC was doing it, but the whole redoing, rebranding, starting fresh, gets a little tiresome. But I figured this would be good for my wife, since she doesn't really read comics at all, and is coming into it brand new. Well, shit, that's why they made these comics, right? The cool thing is I was able to pick up issues 1 through 6 for, I think, $2 each. So most comic shops are going to be pretty cheap if they're in the back issue bin. So I think worth it if you're picking up the physical issue. And this is Scott Snyder. He's a good writer. And this is a little bit different than like Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, in that it's more connected to the rest of the DC universe, and it's not off in Vertigo land. So I think it's pretty cool. I might continue reading this series if I could keep picking up these issues. But yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on Swamp Thing 1?
Well, so I do kind of like Swamp Thing, right? One thing about the Vertigo series I like, especially like Animal Man type of thing, and there's a grittiness to them, even though it's not city based at all. I do like the idea of bringing Swamp Thing into the general DC universe proper. I think the art was pretty decent. There's something, I don't know, something visually that I see here, almost like it's in some ways painted over 3D art in some panels. I don't know. I don't really know a better way to describe it. But there's some detail here that you don't often get, especially in the faces, that you don't often, especially in a DC comic. Because Marvel will hire you some artists, but DC sometimes they might not do that. So I liked that. I like the idea of this story. But you don't get any Swamp Thing action in it. You get Swamp Thing conversation, right? Yeah. You might see some horror little bits and pieces, but I feel like as a standalone issue, it sells you on the reason why there needs to be a hero, but they didn't really give you a Swamp Thing hero. They gave you an angsty hero. Like, I don't know why I should even do this. It wasn't even me that was Swamp Thing all these years. I don't really care. Kill plants. I was going to help them, but I decided, why bother? I'm like, well, then fuck you then. I won't read your comic. You know what I mean? I felt, that's what I felt when I was watching it, reading it, is that he wasn't likable in the way that I would kind of need him to. If this is a Swamp Thing comic and you don't get through the first issue and you don't really like the main character, I like the setup, I like the story, the world building, all of that was good. But I really was not a fan of Alec Holland. And the whole thing here was that in previous incarnations of Swamp Thing, you thought it was Alec Holland whose mind survived whatever, and then he was doing this. But what they changed here is that was not Alec Holland at all. that was someone who had memories that it was Alec Holland, but was not.
Right.
And now Alec Holland's the real Alec Holland, and he has no memory of all the stuff that happened before because it wasn't him. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Manuel?
I did not know that at all. So thank you for that. I liked the story. The story was good in that I know next to nothing about Swamp Thing. Now, I've always been interested in the character, but I've never gone so far as to watch the series or read the books for him. He's always, to me, been sort of an add-on. Like when Constantine would do his monsters run, uh, he would pick Swamp Thing or even Man Thing. He would pick one of those to kind of assist him in, not Man Thing, but yeah, he would have him be in league with his monsters. So I don't know much about him. I know his powers are earth-based, but this story here was really good. I like the grittiness, the darkness of it. There's a scene where there's a couple people out at night and they get attacked by like the swarm of, it's not really shown in this issue exactly what it is. I think it's a reanimated something, but it's composed of wasps, or what was it, bees? Some stinging insects, but it gets into their head and ears and makes them kill themselves. It's really dark. It reminds me kind of like the villains of Doctor Who.
Okay.
How it gets into your mind and causes you to be self-destructive. So that was interesting. I know that since Swamp Thing is a very dark character, he's going to have a dark villain or even darker villain. So I'm aware of that. This was interesting. This will cause me to read the next issue because of the questions that I have. And I did not know, like you said, Russ, I didn't know about the distinction between Dr. Holland and Swamp Thing. I thought they were one and the same. But then at the end of the issue, you see the two meet. And he gets up out of bed. So I'm thinking, is this a dream sequence? But obviously not. So questions ensue. I have to know what happens in issue 2.
So since we're talking Swamp Thing, you know, they made a Swamp Thing series, live action series, and it went to the DC streaming service. CW paid money, so now on the CW app you can watch that series.
Okay.
Legally, right? It's worth your time to watch. This is it's nicely done. It is nicely dark, and it will give you some insight because Jeff Johns is involved. So to give you some insight to the comics run of Swamp Thing, and there you have a whole season. They only did one. I guess they're not going to do another, but it is a complete season. So I recommend, if this interests you at all, to take a look, and then you can see the kind of, you know, you like how the buds got them and changed them. You can see that on the screen, right? And that's very interesting to watch on the screen. So I recommend anyone who's listening, or for you guys, check out that series, and I would like to hear what you think. Maybe come back and we talk about it later.
All right. Cool. Did you guys catch any of the dialogue between him and Superman, where he's talking about how it seems like plants are, these benign, things, but actually they're just moving so slowly that we don't notice how violent they are. I thought that was really interesting. It was a different way to sort of frame that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, we can go to Little Shop of Horrors if we want to, but you think about Venus flytraps. What if they were big enough to eat a human?
Yeah.
Right? And it's not like flies can get out of it, so we wouldn't get out of it either. And the idea that vines are choking a tree and taking its life from it.
Yeah.
But it looks pretty wrapped around my tree. So they have adapted in a way that humans will allow them to do their work without any problem.
Right.
So yes, and the scary part is, what if plants were sentient and conscious? What might they do? Right? You cut these flowers for your girlfriend. You killed my brethren. I'm gonna cheat the life out of you and any human that ever dares to do that again. I am the Daisy.
The Daisy.
All right.
Like at the exact end of the issue, there's the promo for the second issue, and the subtitle was "Raise Them Bones."
mhm.
Just wanted to point that out. Raise them bones.
Them bones, them bones.
All right. Any final thoughts on this particular issue?
No, I think it's a good jumping on point, but I would say this issue in and of itself, I think you would be better served by finding the graphic novel that collects them.
Okay, that's fair.
Have either of you seen the old, I think it's 90s television series for Swamp Thing, or was it a movie?
Yeah,
It was,
it was a series of
Oh,
movies, wasn't it?
yeah, I think it was a couple of movies, but I think there was actually a series.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could, because in here, like in the TV series now, the latest one, mostly you only see him at night, so you don't see him during the day because it's
Yeah.
supposed to be. But in the TV series, he walk around during the day in his swamp, all green, and you could see the latex of it and everything. Definitely, it's not Traumaville. It's not as cheesy as the Toxic Avenger, but it's it's one tier up from that.
Okay.
Yeah, I do remember it. I guess fondly is a good way to put it.
The question is, could you rewatch it and would it hold up?
I've never felt the need to go back.
I think that says something.
I think I've seen enough at this point.
Right. All right, moving on. Rush, your first issue of the week.
Yeah, my first issue is The Marked. It talks about a secret magic society who its power is based in tattoos or markings. And before going any further, I'd like to hear what you think.
All right. I will start with Brian Hammerlin, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. So he is the co-creator of Witchblade, and is doing some really interesting things with his art here. The artwork kind of, I had to stop for a minute, and because I didn't realize, or I wasn't sure if what I was looking at was what I thought it was, and it is. And that is, he's using 3D art and then going on top of it with 2D digital stuff. And so it's kind of an interesting way to compose a comic, because once you create a model, that's it. Then you can pose that model however you want. And so I found myself sort of falling out of the story and just like looking at the art and being like, wow, how did they do that? Or like, you know, is this a different model than the other one? Did they use the same model, just pose it differently? So I was so caught up in just admiring kind of what the way that this was composed, that the story kind of fell flat for me. But I think that it's really cool, like the concept behind how they use their tattoos for the magic, and the fact that you get certain tattoos to do certain things is what I get out of it. And so that was kind of cool. I liked, there's like a single page splash where she puts her arms together and it's a face of a lion, and it, like almost like a Hadoken from Street Fighter or something. Yeah, it was pretty cool. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Like I said, I think I'll have to go back and read it again just so I can get more of the story. Since I spent so much time just sort of digging into the art and trying to figure out like what all they did there. But I mean, since I got that much out of the art, I think it's worth it. It was worth my time.
Manuel.
Beautiful, beautiful. The art, the art, the art, the art. We'll rave on and on about the art. It is amazing. It, in and of itself, is a character on its own. Just and the fact that if they never did magic, if they never did anything supernatural, the art would still be great. But the fact that they use magic and the tattoos come to life, that is the icing on the cake. It is really good. The expressions are really nice. The shadows are well defined. It is really, really good. Great art. There's this issue or a panel where they're walking upstairs, then downstairs, and then it's really interesting. I don't know if that's because they're in a magical place, so therefore the dimensions and that is off. I don't know, but it looks visually it's kick-ass, and I don't use that term often, so note that it was kick-ass. The storyline itself, I was intrigued. I like the world of magic. There's a sci-fi television show series, Magic, or I forget, The Magicians, that has just recently been canceled. So this feeds my need for magic. So thank you for this. It was nice. I like. It's kind of like Tattoo Man and how his tattoos can kind of come to life and be physical, but it's more than that as well. There's this secret society of magicians. Not magic isn't very well known in this world. The girl, the she had to do some sort of drawing in order to get into it because not everybody can see what she sees, and that's her avatar or her, I forget what the word is, but that's kind of her thing, the Phoenix. So the storyline is intriguing. I like this world and that there's a whole magic verse underneath the regular normie society. So I'm interested to see what goes on.
So for me, yeah, I love the art. One of the things that I require in order to bring a book to you guys is that I read it and I want to read another one.
Okay.
So if I'm compelled to read another one, then I need to share one of them that with you. So for this, I read the whole graphic novel collection. And if there was a second one, I would have jumped in that too. This just came out last year. I think there were only 5 or 6 issues for the complete story. It gets really deep. If you are so inclined to read further, you can obviously find a graphic novel kind of anywhere, Amazon included. But I like the art already. And then if you think about it, if someone wanted to make an animated series of this, we already have the CG models, don't we?
Right. Yeah.
We already have the colors. So if you thought about like I created an animated, a unique animated series in a comic. Now, what if someone said coming to Netflix, The Marked, you would watch it,
Yeah.
right? If
Yeah.
it looked like this, you would watch it. So I always feel like anyone who sort of makes their own book or one series of a book, Mark Millar does this a lot. Pretty much every series he writes, he plans for it to find a way to a screen, right?
Yeah.
So I think this was a nice, I don't want to say underhanded, sneaky way to say, I got an animated series if you need one, right? Because a lot of anime series based on comics could come out decades later, right? And so he's one that's already in the can. So I like the look. I like the idea. I actually did. Uh, um, I'm the kind that more gets into the story and come back and watch the art again
Okay.
instead of first. But I know you draw, so it would pull at you. So for me, I know, so that's awesome. And I notice how it makes me feel. But then I got to get the story. Then I come back and see what I missed on the panels because I was so into the story. So
Yeah.
that's sort of how I made it. So for me, I go back and look at the panels because I already know what's happening. And I'm like, oh, I see what you did there. Oh, I see what you did there. Right. So for me, the art alone, as you said, Matt, is a feast and worthwhile. And it's not a stupid plot. You know what I mean? It's not, I'm not saying it's the best plot ever, but it's not like, what the heck's going on here, right?
Yeah.
You can do angsty teens. It's sort of a dark. Another thing I liked is, there used to be a thing to go around that says, draw this, and then you can sort of come to our drawing school or whatever. There was like a Mickey Mouse type thing, right? I like the idea of there's these flyers around, draw this, and if you want to input it, call this number or whatever, right? I remember things like that. And what if you saw that, but you saw something no one else could see, right?
Right.
And that was kind of amazing to me. Like that's how we identify you because you see something other people don't. And there's no outward manifestation, right? It's not like you're clearly a mutant. You just can see things. And this is how we identify you. You identify yourself and how we find you. So I like the idea of that. So I'm glad you enjoyed it to the extent that you did. And feel free to read more. Shall I move on?
Yeah.
Okay, next book, The Ludocrats. I almost passed on this because the art is so zany. But then I read it and I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" I couldn't stop laughing. And the zane, the pseudo intellectual, and all of those things that are happening here, and the nudity and the levels of, this is a comic that looks like on the surface of it should be for kids, but it's not.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm going to leave it there, and then you guys tell me what you think.
Man, you want to go first?
Sure. Um, this is so ridiculous. This is so ludicrous, and as you mentioned, zany, to where I love it. I love it. This was a bunch of just asinine statements. They thrive off ludocracy, ludicrousness. It is a very warped world. And to be normal is to be boring. And boring is a great offense. So I really like that concept. I really, really like the concept of this world where everyone's not striving, everyone is loony, and that is the acceptable norm. That is the acceptable behavior. But if you're boring, if you're not loony, you're ostracized. You're not a part of this rambunctious, ludicrous society. The art itself, the art goes in line with the zaniness. It's not too far off. The art is palpable, meaning like I don't have to do as much configuring. If I had to do a lot of configuring with the words, the dialogue, and the art, I think it'd be too much. But the art is tamed down a bit to where it's cartoony, but not too much to where I am like I'm reading a Neil Gaiman comic. So this is great. This is good. Good balance between the two, the art and the dialogue. And I was unaware of this. So it's issue number one. This is good. This is a great laugh.
Yeah, this is like an Adult Swim cartoon. Just kind of what it feels like on the page. I at first was like, "This. Why did Russ pick this book?" And then the main character chops the dude's head off, and I was like, "Oh, that's why Russ picked this book." That's this is. But yeah, I mean, it's really cool. I like how stylized everything is. A lot of movement going on the page. There's some interesting things that they do with um, the way in which words are sort of part of the art, and the dialogue itself, like the dialogue bubbles, aren't outlined in any way. They just sort of appear. It has a very unique character to it. I don't really know what the hell is going on. Like I'm reading through it and I'm like, okay, this this is exactly what it sets out to be. A world full of ludocrats, people who are absolutely insane. But somehow it works. And somehow it's intriguing and yeah, I mean, this is a pretty good book. I didn't really know what to expect, and like I said, when I first started reading it, I was like, "Why did Russ pick this?" But by the end, it sort of pays off, even though it's like an LSD trip, you know. Yeah, it was good. It was a good issue.
I like the dialogue. I like so, when you look in TV and comics, when you look at aristocrats, let them eat cake, they've always been ridiculous.
Yeah,
Right? And yet they have all the money and everything else should run line with their foolishness, right? So this to me is that dialed way up,
right.
right? Like you can't be part of us if you're not. Like they acknowledge we are ludicrous and we wear it as a badge of honor. And if you can't meet the level of ludicrousy that we do, you must be killed. You must be destroyed, right? It's like I remember this part where it says, ludicrous, at best you're zany, right? Just right. And then, and I like the part where the lady has inquired, can you handle up to 10,000 psi of pelvic thrusts? Right. And I'm like, right? So all of that, because this is how you expect aristocrats to behave, right? And in a way, aristocrats again are always ludicrous. This just takes it much more literally, right?
Yeah.
And one other thing I wanted to point out that I only got after I went back and read it, but it's on the first page. These little tiny animals that are surrounding the character on the first page, I think,
Yeah.
little tiny yellow hot dogs, they are throughout the book doing a bunch of crazy stuff. And if
Okay.
you look for them, you'll see them in almost at least on every page, if not every panel. Like there are ludicrous eaters or something, or there's, like flies come to crap, right? These things come to ludocracy and they're all around. You see them flying balloons, you see them chasing after the next ludicrous thing and just looking at like the minions, right?
Okay.
But a lot smaller, right? And I think there was a good, because they keep bringing them in, right? Almost again, I can't find a page where you don't see them looking around, just soaking it all in. Like, this is full of shit, so there's going to be flies. This is full of ludicrous, so you're going to have these things.
Okay.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the art, and the art, makes you think kids should enjoy this. And if you let your kid read this, you are the person, right? Because it is not for them, right? Because there's nakedness right away, right? Right? There's nakedness. There's talking about sex right away, right? There's and it's funny because even in their ludicrous, just like aristocrats, they take themselves very seriously.
Yeah.
Real thing for them. So I thought this was very much different than what we normally read. I thought it might be a bit of a visual treat. And the art was interesting enough to say, well, at least I can make Matt look at this art and tell me what he thinks. So that's why I chose it. I will be reading the second issue of the Ludocrats. I hope you will join me. And any further thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, I think that you could let a kid read this, and I think the shit would just fly out of the top of their head. They wouldn't even know what it was that they were reading. So it's, in a way, it's sort of, it's good in that regard, because
So
it's,
Adult Swim.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's Adult Swim, but it's kind of SpongeBob too, in a way. I don't think that I think kids would get something out of this with the way that the artwork is done, and the words just wouldn't make any sense, and might grow up later and be like, wow, I can't believe I read that as a kid. But yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you somewhat liked it. Emmanuel, your turn.
All right. So my first issue would be Youth. This is issue number 2. It is a current Comixology original. So 2020 is the date of origin, and it is a story. This is issue number 2, so there's a bit of a backstory. There's a coming of age story of like two teenagers that run away from um, their place in California. It's set in California. It's a very California feel, in my opinion. The car breaks down and they're off the road. Something unique happens, something magical or extraterrestrial. Something happens to give them all powers. So think Chronicle slash X-Men. What do you got?
I'll go. So yes, I did get the Chronicle vibes. Now I read the first issue of this series because I'm trying to be ahead of the game here, and the first issue was pretty terrible because it was all teen angst, right? Because you know how in the end where the boulder hits the truck, the meteor hits the truck. That's how the first issue ended. So it was all about their crap and foolishness, and I'm in my 20s and no one appreciates me and understand me, and I just love what I love, and I don't understand why the world is so messed up, and I hated it. So I didn't bring it to you. But then you brought issue 2, and it's an altogether different book. There's better dialogue, and you still have those people I can't stand in it, but the powers are interesting. The two cops driving their dialogue, and then in the very beginning, the whole non-worded dialogue or fight between a good and evil, or opposite characters, and there's no words, right? So this sort of really elevated the book from what it was issue one. I do think it's a good modern take on powers, and even the fat Nick Fury wannabe, bootleg Nick Fury, they even called him in the comic. I do think it's a good take on, and this is why teenagers can't be allowed to have powers, right? Or 20 somethings can't be allowed to have powers. So if you got to think in a world where people are start getting humans start getting superpowers, do you think the government will really let them be free? Or would they suicide squad them off? Because these kids, you already know that they're going to kill people. You already know, probably not on purpose, but they're going to kill somebody, right? So should they be killed? I wouldn't mind being an executioner. I said, oh, no, I already know you've already had those tendencies. Lay down in the block right here. I'll make it quick. Right. So it's a really thing on the type of young people we are raising in the world and what they're committed to and what they're willing to do and not be responsible for the damage it causes. Not really own it. Just sort of be aware of it. So I enjoyed that. And I guess I spilled over in because I read the next issue. Next issue is pretty good too. So
right.
I spoke about when I talked about the cops. The next issue has some good dialogue between two cops. And the art gets a little better, but it's still subpar. It's a subpar art, right? It's not where it needs to be for me to do an ongoing purchase. It's not terrible. It's just I didn't feel like they.
I think it's only 4 issues, if I'm not mistaken. So you get a complete story in 4 issues. I'm gonna be critical first, and then end on the positive.
Good for you.
So the artwork is horrible in this book. It is so rushed and quite obviously digital. Like I could do this on my Pixel book pretty easily. Like, let's make a comic, guys. Let's do this.
Yes. Yes.
So, in that regard, the fact that this was put out and somebody believed in it, I think is kind of cool. Because if I had read this when I was younger, I would have been like, "Damn, I can really do this. I can really, make something and do some art that somebody cares about." So in that regard, I think that it works. I just wish they had put a little more time into refining the art so that it wasn't quite so sketchy. It wasn't, these thick, undeliberate lines. Like, yeah. And the composition is not the best. You have this is a digital only book. It's kind of short, but there's a page that is just black. Why? That makes no sense to me. Why you would do that? So, with that said, and as much as that stuff annoyed me, I do have to echo what Russ was saying in terms of like it's a very creative way to do powers and to tackle the idea of what happens when you give people who are not mature enough to even have powers in the first place. What happens when you give them powers? So the dialogue and the concept sort of saves this, but otherwise, like if I saw this on the shelf and I flipped through it, I would not buy it. If not for somebody recommending it, whose opinion I care about, and saying like, check this out, read it, it would be so hard, But I think it does some interesting things. I might check out the other ones because they are so short. The trade, the 4 issues, pretty easy to get through, I think. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
I actually liked Chronicle, the movie. There was, in a lot of ways, this kind of parallels that because a lot of the feedback I got from Chronicle when I talked to people about it, they felt that there was no explanation as to where the powers came from, why, no real good character development. Yeah, you have this kid that was taken advantage of or emotionally bullied by his family, and then now he becomes the villain because that's the kind of person he is, but there's no real great emotional dialogue or emotional development. So this is kind of reminiscent of that, and I think that's why I had the affinity for it.
All right.
My next issue is the JLA. It is issue number 43, 1997's Tappable. A bit of backstory about this. As we all know, Batman is the world's greatest detective. So, and he's also the contingency man. He has a contingency for every one of his cohorts. Superman, Flash, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, all of them. He has ways in which to defeat them. If your power is like Earth based, he'll have something to defeat your Earth based powers, and he has plans. So someone has gotten into his plans and used them to defeat the Justice League, and chaos ensues. You guys takes?
I thought this was awesome. Thank you for bringing the Justice League to me so that a good jumping on point, a good story. I think it helps that I already know a little bit about the characters. And like Ra's al Ghul, I know who he is from Batman and Batman the Animated Series. Um, so if you don't know who that character is, I haven't read the rest of these yet. I will. I don't know if this whole arc will sort of give you a good introduction, I guess, to who his character is, but it seems like it will. And I think he's a really cool villain to have. That's not, Lex Luthor or I'm blanking on the what's the contingent of supervillains? They live in the skull.
Legion of Doom.
The Legion, yeah, it's not like corny like the Legion of Doom. It's like a really interesting villain. So I thought that was pretty cool. The artwork is super late '90s, like, but I love that. So I thought it was good. I like that Flash has got this very spiky, angular tread on the bottom of his shoes, and it's very stylistic the way that it's drawn. Um, I thought it was kind of cool that you get to see some of Wonder Woman's powers that they don't often show off. She does have the speed of Mercury, so she can keep up with Flash to a certain extent. Um, this has Plastic Man. Love it. It's got a great. He always felt kind of like a bootleg Mr. Fantastic to me, but is a very different character and does bring that levity. I felt bad when he was frozen and cracked into a million pieces. I felt bad for Plastic Man. Yeah, this is a great issue overall. Artwork is cool. The story is very interesting. What happens when heroes can't communicate with each other? I don't know. We need to read through the rest of the issues to find out. Russ, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm sure I've read this series before, and I guess there was that animated movie that's sort of similar to this, right? Take draws from this, and I did like that movie. I The art is just okay for me, right?
Okay.
It's not bad or wrong. It's just not compelling. It doesn't make me want to turn the page and see the next piece of art. And I kind of always felt like Justice League should be a premier book and you should be compelled to see the next page. So to some degree, I'm not so much a fan. I do like it's Wally West is the Flash, not dumbass Barry Allen. And you could tell he's younger because when Wonder Woman channels the race, he'd be like, you know, so I like that. And you got the Kyle Rayner, which is basically Wally West's age also, Green Lantern. I like Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul, depending on who you ask.
Right.
While he is uh, certainly an arrogant bastard, not unlike Luthor, he doesn't trip himself up as much as Luthor always does.
Yeah.
Right. When he lays a plan into action, he has a whole bunch of minions who would give their life for him. Not too many people willing to give their life for Luthor, right? But he can make a call or just tell one person, Ubu, I think is his assistant's name, and to make it happen, and it'll happen, right?
Yeah.
You have to admire the fact that, and even though in the beginning shows you he still has idiots, right? But he kills them so they don't procreate, which is good. You don't get a lot of murder in a Justice League book, you know. So I like Ra's al Ghul as a foil, and you can see how he is a match for Batman because even though he probably got all these plans from Batman, he did carry them all out at the same time,
Yeah.
right? Batman doesn't really have an army to do that. Batman could fight one of them, but in order for Batman to do all these things at the same time, will require him to have a level of minions that he does not have. And I like that Batman will figure this out. So we're gonna we're gonna hit him in his dick and make him just like and I can't deal with you guys right now. Is anybody dead? All right, fuck you. I gotta handle this right now, right? Very good way to handle the Batman and not kill him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because Ra's al Ghul is a murderer, League of Assassins, right? In theory, Ra's al Ghul could have killed half of these people, right? Just walk up to them. Because here's the thing, obviously he knew who they were, right? Or he would be able to find them and do the things he did for some of them, right? Right. I think Ra's al Ghul is a good villain, and I like the fact that it's a villain that can stomp the whole Justice League but has no actual powers. Like he has a plan, he has the money and means to carry it out, and he is all in, right? And he can work all of that out, and it just makes you wonder why Luthor never really long term destroyed the Justice League, right? Because of his Achilles heel, so arrogant. I need the world to know that I did it, right?
Yeah.
I got, my Lexo suit. I got to put my name on everything. You know what I'm saying? Ra's al Ghul don't got Ra's al Ghul titty shoes. You know what I mean? Right?
I think
Uh,
I think he's
Goulash.
I think he's more of in a position having the mostly immortality to really put in place like a super long-term plan
Yes.
for seizing and maintaining power.
And then you look at his goal, not unlike Thanos, right? Destroy a certain percentage of the population
Right.
so everyone can survive, and that's better for humanity. So is he a bad guy? Because he didn't actually murder anybody except for the guy who killed the last Bengal tiger in the world or something like that, right? Right. And that person really deserved to die because he fed him chocolate, right? Really, you got hired for this and you fed a cat, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm okay with that person dying. So in the scheme of things, is he a bad guy?
Maybe that's why I like him. Maybe he's kind of like Magneto. Maybe he's
Yeah.
just misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
So
So all in all, I think it's a good book. I think if you're a fan of Justice League and if you're looking for Justice League as you were, Matt, this certainly needs to be in your I read this column.
yeah, for sure.
Sorry, I went long-winded on
Brings
that.
me to question. What do you think about a Raj Al Ghul versus Vandal Savage?
Who has even
Now,
to think about?
yeah, but I don't think Vandal Savage is as entrepreneurial as Raish. But
I'm going to say that's not true. I'm thinking if you trust the animated series, Vandal Savage has been around since caveman days. There are comic books, period comic books, like when during the Crusades. Well, Vandal Savage was a great warrior. Vandal Savage, by the way, was Genghis Khan, right? Genghis Khan ran a whole nation on horseback, right? Vandal Savage does have minions, not unlike he has basically everything Ra's al Ghul has, but longer, right? And even if you look in the most recent Young Justice animated series, you'll see him shaking hands with Darkseid. You're not going to see Vandal Savage shaking hands with Darkseid, right? So in theory, Vandal Savage is even bigger and more And of course, who do you trust, Vandal or Luther? Right? Luther will always mess up. It's like the Riddler. The Riddler is always going to mess up. He's the smartest guy in the room, but he always has to give riddles. He can't stop himself. He's always got to give you a way to defeat him. Like everybody who has plans, here's a way to defeat me if you can decipher it, but your bitch ass not as smart as me, right? Oh, psych. Somebody always is. And that, I think, is the problem with most villains. If you go back to the Legion of Doom, it's either their full-on arrogance or their sociopathic tendencies that they don't clear up for themselves. But Ra's al Ghul doesn't have that. Ra's al Ghul knows who he is consistent. Vandal Savage. If I had to pick Vandal Savage versus Ra's al Ghul, I'm going to have to give the edge to Vandal Savage because living even longer and having much more longer to plan. Right? If humanity were to die out and Vandal Savage knows he's going to be around for it, he could easily plan that, right? He doesn't have to accelerate it. Whereas every time Ra's al Ghul goes in the pits, it gets a little crazier.
Yeah, I guess that's the one thing I didn't think of.
Mm-hmm. And remember, Ra's al Ghul is trying to find an heir. Remember?
Yeah.
His goal was to find an heir.
Well, he has a daughter, right?
Yeah, there would be no Damian Wayne because Ra's al Ghul is Damian Wayne's grandfather.
Yeah.
Right? So he already knows he won't be around. And so he has to find an heir that's capable and also someone that he can whim-wham enough or mess with enough so that they will continue his legacy. And he's not good at that as he would like to be. Right? If he would let his daughter run shit, he would, but he's also so old school. Yeah. Whereas the other guy got no problem with, he got no problem with his minions rising to the level that they're capable of. Right? Most of them are capable as him, but if it's a woman, it's fine. It's a woman. I liken both of them to who's the X-Men villain? Apocalypse.
Okay.
Apocalypse. Who Apocalypse has been around that long, right? He doesn't care if you're male or female. No. He knows that this is the rule. If not for the actual superpowers of Apocalypse, I would say he's a very similar villain.
Yeah. Okay.
Great case.
All right. And that's all of our books for the week.
One more thing. Yes, I love Plastic Man in the JLA, and damn it, I hated that they broke him. I love Plastic Man he should be in every Justice League animated series should have Plastic Man. You should do it, right? Yeah. Just the ridiculousness, right? With Plastic Man and not Elongated Man, because Elongated Man and Reed Richards, they can stretch, but Plastic Man can just basically shapeshift.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All their powers to a whole nother level. Right. Plastic Man has even been able to change the color of himself. Right. Okay. And then the next question is: Plastic Man wearing clothes?
Absolutely not. He's a pervert. We all know this about him.
Clothes are hanging low.
Before we go, I do want to say, like, comment, and subscribe. If you found this to be of any value at all, please like, comment, and subscribe. Ring the notification bell. That way you get notifications. Well, I'm just doing the whole spiel.
The regular, everyday YouTube thing. Actually,
exactly.
we did have I think one comment last week. Somebody chimed in and says they enjoyed the episode. So I appreciated that. And I told them.
We're big time now.
Yeah. I will say I wanted to show you guys these two books that I picked up. Crisis on Infinite Earths, the 100-page giant issues from DC.
Wow.
I would have shared these issues. The only problem is that there are no digital versions of these books. So these books are one or two new stories and then reprints of old stories. So the first one has 4 stories in it. The second one has 5. The first one has like a reprint of the original Crisis on Infinite Earths #1, but the the first story that's in the book is like a prequel to the CW Crisis on Infinite Earths series. So it has all those characters, Felicity Smoke or Snoke or however her last name is pronounced. As much as I don't care for her, is a character in this, and sort of is kind of a cool little introduction to the whole CW event that they did. If you can find these for the cover price, which is $5, I would highly recommend picking them up because I looked it up on Amazon and these are already going for like $30 a piece. So they've gone up almost 10 times in value.
Wow.
Well, it's collecting for you.
Yeah.
I hope the climate control that you apparently need to have to keep things up. And then if you wait long enough, you have to sell it at the right time too, because if you wait long enough, it's not going to be there.
True. So yeah, any final thoughts? Russ, you had one link that you posted at the bottom regarding the...
Oh yeah, Stormy Daniels is creating a comic book called Space Force, and obviously you need to read it because Stormy Daniels, everything she does is amazing, right? And she also, there's a character that looks like Trump. We'll put a link in the show notes. You definitely want to follow that because, of course, you want to know what Stormy Daniels is doing and how she is still relevant now that she is older.
Do we know who is publishing this? I didn't see whether it was DC, Marvel, Image.
I don't know. Doesn't probably not the first two, but you know, who knows? Doesn't say.
I think. Well, I feel like if Stan Lee was still alive, he would have totally picked it up. But like, hell yeah, we're publishing this.
Yes, Stan Lee. You got to admit, for an older guy,
right?
Stan Lee made every effort to keep comics relevant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He was open to new things and new concepts way before, you know, in comics that, you know, because DC is notorious for some of the crap that they pulled as far as racial stuff and insensitivity, right? But, you know, even in Stan Lee's time, you get, I don't know if even in Stan Lee's time, you get all these characters of diversity that are not just Black Vulcan, like somebody we had to throw in there to say, or what is it on the Super Friends, the Japanese guy who was just named Samurai. Never really pulled a sword on anybody. And when he would say his powers, he would say the Japanese name for the wind and he would become a tornado and stuff like that. Exactly. Right. Or the Apache chief who had one thing and one thing only, he could turn big, right? And instead of giving him a name that meant anything, you just call him Apache Chief, right? Like, really? Because Apache Chiefs were really back in the day. But, you know. But under Stan Lee, you got people like Miss Marvel. You got people like a lot of characters that are really diverse and women included in that. I mean, you know, the fact that Miss Marvel became Captain Marvel and became the premier Captain Marvel.
Yeah,
I would like it to be different from the other character, but the fact that they did that and elevated her and made her part of the Super Seven pretty much for the Avengers, that's a big deal. So I'm always gonna love the impact Stan Lee has had and continues to have on my life.
Yeah.
The rest of it, enough said.
All right. So, Manuel, you bringing an X-Men book next week?
If that is the challenge, I will rise to the occasion.
Challenge.
No, I'm just giving you crap. I wanted you to say that you're still not an X-Men fan.
I'm still an X-Men fan. There's no change there.
They're not going to make any X-Men books you like because you only like the ones that they stopped. Right?
Yeah, that's my gripe. That's my grievance right there. I like a thing and they cancel it and stop it.
because no one else likes it but you. No one else is buying those episodes, those books, the Flash.
I don't agree with that argument because there's been plenty of things that I've liked that they've canceled that other people have liked as well. I mean,